This video was brought to you by CuriosityStream. We've all exaggerated our accomplishments on our CVs, whether it's playing up a role that we did or making our job title seem a little more important than it actually was. But most of us have never actively lied so much in our job application that it makes our employers and colleagues question whether our name is actually our real name. But that's the predicament that George Santos, Republican representative for New York's 3rd District, currently faces with the American public. After an explosive New York Times expose in mid-December, Santos has faced numerous calls to resign or even be expelled from Congress. And not just from the Democrats, but also from fellow Republican congresspeople and even his local Republican Party. So far, though, Santos has refused, and he's quickly becoming one of the most infamous Congress members in recent memory. So in this video, we're going to explain who George Santos is, how he got into Congress, and whether he can survive. First and foremost, who is George Santos? Well, surprisingly, it's not actually an easy question to answer. But let's start with what we do know to be true about the guy. Santos, originally known as Anthony Zaborowski and Anthony DeVolder by some, was born on July 22nd, 1988 to Brazilian immigrant parents. In the past, Santos has claimed that he grew up in abject poverty and was even so poor as an adult that he couldn't even pay for the funeral expenses for his mother's funeral in 2016. Although this might be a lie, given that he's also claimed that his mother died in 9/11, which isn't true. That she died of cancer a few years after, which also isn't true, assuming that a few years after doesn't mean 15 years after. That her parents were Jewish refugees who fled persecution in Ukraine and survived the Holocaust, which is at least unlikely. Or that she worked her way up to become the first female executive at a major financial institution. Anyway, from October 2011 to July 2012, Santos worked as a customer service representative at a call center for Dish Network, an American television provider. He subsequently worked for Met Global, a Turkish hospitality service, from 2014 to 2016. Sometime after 2020, though, he worked for Harbor City Capital, a Florida investment company that was accused of running a $17 million Ponzi scheme by the SEC. Now, these are all places that Santos apparently did indeed work. However, he's also lied about working for some more prestigious institutions. In his resume submitted to the Nassau County Republican Committee, he claimed to have previously worked for the Citigroup between February 2011 and January 2014, and Goldman Sachs from January to August 2017. Although neither bank has any record of him working there. Santos also lied about his education. On his resume, Santos claimed to have a bachelor's degree, hold a GPA of 3.85, and graduate in the top 1% of his class in 2010, before going on to achieve an MBA from NYU in 2013. But none of this ever happened. And all of that was before he even decided to run for Congress. Santos originally ran back in 2020 for New York's 3rd Congressional District, earning himself the Republican nomination, but losing in the general to the Democratic candidate. Now, we know what you're thinking. How come Santos's history of falsehoods weren't uncovered during the first race in 2020? Well, the seat just wasn't that competitive back then, and Republicans had no one else running for the seat, so Santos just got the nomination by default. And it's not just the Republicans who didn't look into it. The Democrats didn't want to give the unknown Santos any publicity, so they didn't really invest in opposition research either. And as expected, the Democrats won by 12.5 points. But this was an improvement for the Republicans, who lost by 19 points in the district the previous round. Local Republican leadership was impressed by Santos's performance. So, when the maps were redrawn in 2022, the 3rd District was made more competitive, and the Democratic incumbent resigning to run for New York governor, leaving a seat vacant for Santos, who was hoping to ride the anti-Biden wave right into office. And while that's not exactly what happened, because the midterms broke historical norms, with Biden's Democrats doing fairly well nationally, New York was bloody for the Democrats, and Santos won by 7.6 points. Now, during his campaign, Santos lied about numerous things in his personal life. For instance, he claimed that 4 of his employees died in the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting, but an expose from the New York Times revealed that none of Pulse's victims had any connection to Santos or any of the companies he'd worked for. And as we've said already, Santos has made up various facts about his mother in the past. In response, Santos said in a statement that he would address all questions in the coming days, only to later admit that he did indeed fabricate his background. In the days since, reporters have uncovered more and more lies and dishonesty from Santos. For example, Santos claimed to be openly gay for a decade before being elected to Congress. But he was married to a woman until September 2019 and was only formally divorced 2 weeks before the launch of his 2020 campaign. Santos also denied ever performing as a drag queen, but a prominent Brazilian drag performer posted a picture of her and an individual who seems to be Santos in Brazil in the late 2000s. And this is particularly awkward, given the Republican Party's stances on drag and other forms of expression, largely from the LGBTQ+ community. After these revelations, many Democrats, both locally and nationally, have called on Santos to resign, as have a majority of his fellow New York Republican congresspeople. Santos is also under investigation by numerous entities, such as the Eastern District of New York and Nassau County, for his previous suspicious financial disclosures, as well as Brazilian authorities looking into him for embezzlement. The latter investigation was previously shelved after Brazilian authorities couldn't find Santos. But since these revelations, they've reopened the investigation. And since Brazil and the US have an extradition treaty, Santos could be brought back to face charges. All in all, this isn't looking good for the New York congressman. So, on to the final question. Is Santos going to resign or be forced out in any way? Well, it's not likely to happen against his will. Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has stated that Santos was elected by his constituents and should be able to serve a full 2 years, or at least until the House Ethics Committee is done investigating. And given that expulsion from the House requires a 2/3 majority, that means an expulsion looks pretty unlikely. Plus, Republican leadership has an incentive to keep Santos around. Remember, Republicans have a narrow 222 to 212 majority, and they're already facing problems even electing Speaker McCarthy. So if Santos resigns or is even expelled, that would trigger a special election in New York's 3rd, a seat which, according to Cook's political report, would likely be won back by the Democrats, further reducing McCarthy's narrow margins. So even if Santos decides not to run for re-election, which looks likely at the moment, he'll probably survive his first term, which is, well, a pretty damning indictment of American politics. If you want more from TLDR News, then you should check out Nebula, the streaming service where you can watch all of TLDR's videos ad-free, and where you can check out a whole bunch of exclusive videos which will never come to YouTube. There's a whole load of TLDR over there. So if you're a big fan of the channel, then that's the best way to watch and support us. If you'd like to sign up, then you can get access to Nebula via the Nebula Curiosity Stream bundle. Curiosity Stream is home to some really interesting documentaries, many of which our audience are sure to enjoy. And the good news is that if you sign up to Curiosity Stream using the link in the description, you'll also get Nebula thrown in for free. That's 2 streaming services for less than $15 a month. The link is down below, and thanks for your support.